Viva Magenta is the Pantone color of the year 2023. It's a vivid, intense crimson red, and Pantone describes it as a rebellious color and powerful, but with a rare core of softness, compassion and fierceness wrapped up in the same color. Pretty exciting, eh? I'm Jorunn Harness and I run the website Nordic Simplicity, and I want to show you a little bit about the options you have to adapt your adapt the magenta to your season. You're not going to adapt, you're going to make the color adapt to you. And magenta is going to be everywhere. So why not get to know it and see how you can use it according to your color palette, the color palette of you are one of the 12 seasons and you want to use magenta or some kind of version of it, then this is the video for you. This is how Pantone is presenting the color Viva Magenta, and it's very vibrant, isn't it? And as you can see, they're already suggesting different versions of the color in their presentation of it, but the color name is Viva Magenta 18/1750. And this is what it looks like on swatches. This is on one of the swatches that I've seen. Magenta is very similar to fuchsia, but fuchsia is more pink and closer to purple than magenta is. Magenta is more red. I find this particular version of the magenta more pink than the Pantone version, which I find distinctly more red. I found a lot of information about fuchsia and magenta on the website colorpsychology.org, which you might want to look up. It's very interesting. So, magenta is not a primary color. It's a purplish red that's created by mixing violet, blue, and red with absolutely no green in the mix. And there is, according to colorpsychology.org, there is a difference between the French version of magenta and the American magenta. American magenta being more pink and French magenta more red. Now, fun fact, the color is named after the Battle of Magenta. The battle was fought in 1859, and the magenta dye was invented in that same year, and it was named after the battle, in which the French Sardinian, under Napoleon III, they won a very important victory in the Second Italian War for Independence. And possibly this is why the French version of this color is more blood red than the American version. I don't know. To me, it does seem like the Viva Magenta of Pantone is a lot more red than other versions of magenta that I was able to find on the internet. And though we often think of magenta as a kind of a very intense hue, it does have room for other varieties. I found these on colorpsychology.org. And this will come in very handy when we try to find versions of magenta to fit in the 12 color palettes of the seasons. Now, Pantone suggests using Viva Magenta as an accessory to wake up your neutrals, for instance, pale gray, pairing it with pale gray, or to use it with blues or pastels. Yeah, I'm a little suspicious about pairing the pure Viva Magenta with grayed pastels. Well, that's my opinion. But I can picture it with a deep blue or navy. And Pantone goes on to call it universally flattering, which would be the equivalent to a type 0 blood that can be given to all human beings. So, not sure. Let's have a look at how Viva Magenta looks like with the palettes of the 12 seasons. My hunch before going into this is that the intensity and relative coolness of Viva Magenta is going to vibe well with the 3 winters, but summers, well, let's have a look. They might have a hard time balancing the intensity, and it's going to be really interesting to see how the 2 true warm seasons do next to this color. So, let's hop to it, shall we? Here it is, the pure Viva Magenta. And first of all, we are going to look at it next to the dark winter color palette. And as always, the palettes are with kind permission from True Color International. And I kind of see a certain kinship with Dark Winter. Next to the Dark Winter palette, the Viva Magenta does look smoky enough to balance the darkness of the Dark Winter palette. If we pick some coats in reds, we can see that, yes, there is a certain balance. So if you use the redder side of the magenta, you can wear this. It's going to be that'll be one of your versions of magenta. Moving on to True Winter, we see the same. There are some darker reds in the I'll show you here, these ones, which I feel are the closest ones to the magenta. So I think we can find clothing to use with a color palette like this. The darker, it's almost cranberry red, it's a dark fire engine red, and because these are shiny, I think they will bring out a lot of nice winter crispness and be in tune with the Viva Magenta. Now, Bright Winter, yeah, we have some reds here that look very, very similar to this Viva Magenta. And again, I picked a leather coat and a kind of a purpley magenta coat to bring out that interesting intensity. So yeah, that's a go. Moving around the circle, Bright Spring is our next one. And yeah, well, it could be worse. It could be worse. We don't really see a clear red as this in the palette, and this might look a little more dead than this. This is decidedly more vibrant in my mind. So I would go for slightly more, this because it's shiny, it looks lighter. And this has a bit of yellow in it, bringing in the coral. So we're kind of bridging it a little bit over from the magenta. Could work. True Spring. Yeah, we're getting warmer here. These are very, very sunny, warm, and this is cooler. So I'm not sure. I'm definitely leaning towards the more sunshine yellow tints of these. I guess I don't think I would go here because it looks a little too cool and too dead, won't you say? Do you agree with me? Yeah, I don't know. I agree with me. I'm here with these ones. Definitely, I think this is the better way to use a deep red for tomato red, really, for the True Spring. So I wouldn't try too hard to match the pure Viva Magenta for True Spring. And maybe even better is to ditch it completely and go towards an apricot coral kind of coat like this, and let Viva Magenta live its Viva life alone without True Spring. Moving on to Light Spring. Now I feel the Viva Magenta looks even more dead, because when you look at it next to this sunshine infused, brilliantly light spring palette, it looks very dark and dead. I use the word dead a lot when they're not. Yeah, well, then sorry, Viva Magenta, that's what you look like. And because if I were to pick coats for a light spring, I would much rather go towards the coral apricot side of red instead of going to the cool. Well, see how cool that Viva Magenta looked compared to the light spring? Just like with the True Spring palette, it's just too cool and too dark. It doesn't have any sunshine in it, which Light Spring really thrives on. So this is much better. You'll be much happier with this kind of color palette, and let Viva Magenta live its Viva life on its own, like True Spring would. Better yet, maybe go for something like this that picks up different kinds of red, and it's not dead, it's vibrant, it's light, it has apricot, it has sunshine in it. Now Light Summer. Now we're getting a little cooler, and so Viva Magenta doesn't look as out of place here as it did in Light Spring. You see there is a lot of red in the Light Summer palette, and there is a certain similarity with some of them, especially the ones that are leaning a little bit towards coral. I picked some darker reds here. I went to the dark raspberry side of Light Summer, and I'm thinking maybe that could be the version of Viva Magenta for Light Summer. Unless, of course, you want to stay light and just use a bit of the darker magenta hues with a light blue. And there I go. I have to go back on what I said about magenta with pastel blue. It doesn't really look that bad, does it? So this is a wonderful way for Light Summer to sneak in some magenta into the wardrobe without it taking over. True Summer. Now I find that the Viva Magenta looks too warm next to the reds of the True Summer. They are more in the lavender purplish kind of muted reds. And suddenly Viva Magenta looks a little too vivacious, shall we say. And as you see, I've picked more of a mauve and pink for the coats, and leaving Viva Magenta a little on the side, a little lonely. So maybe we'll just wave completely goodbye to it and say that True Summer is much better off picking reds like this instead of that very vibrant Viva Magenta red. Soft Summer. Soft Summer is a little warmer, and there are some terracotta coralish in here, which makes it a little better. Again, I've decided to go a little deeper and a little duller, and this is how I suggest you go if you are a soft summer. Soft autumn. Then we're moving into the territory of English rose and terracotta pink. And I find that the Viva Magenta shown here has too little brown in it to be ideal for soft autumn. It looks a little too vibrant. When I pick reds for a soft autumn, I dull it down and I go for the terracotta rose colors, and I you can see here that the Viva Magenta looks a little lonely and too vibrant. So let's get rid of that and stay in this territory for soft autumn. This is so much more you. True autumn, well, it's kind of warm and there are some brighter rusts here, but this is definitely cooler than this side of the golden reds. And I would blend a little more rust into it if I were to find something red, a red coat for a true autumn, because this looks a little too cool now next to these golden warm colors of true autumn. Ah, looks much better, don't you think? Last but not least, the dark autumn palette, and we see also here the lack of rust in this. It's too cool. The spiciness, the richness of the dark autumn palette is not present in the Viva Magenta, and you see how it sticks out like a sore thumb next to the palette and some coats in that color. So again, it's a sigh of relief when we're waving goodbye to Viva Magenta and leaving dark autumn with the wonderful rich warm rust colors instead. So that concludes my roundup of coats that are or aren't in vibe with the Viva Magenta for the 12 seasons. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. You can check out more blog posts on NordicSimplicity.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter and get even more tips. See you then. Bye.